All right, there he is from The Athletic, Bruce Feldman. Known him for a long time, a fellow grad. Always good to talk to an alum. And Bruce, you, of all people in the industry, have great relationships when it comes to coaches and assistants and staffs. And I know you've been following what's been going on down here in Miami. And it wasn't the season we all thought was going to happen when Mario Cristobal took over a year ago, 5-7, not something Canes fans are generally pleased with. Although if it's not, some national championship, they're generally not pleased anyways. But he needed to find two new coordinators. We'll start on the defensive side. You reported on this extensively. Lance Guidry comes to Miami. He's been in a lot of places. I remember him at McNeese, a good old Southern boy. What do we know about Lance Guidry and what he'll bring to the University of Miami defense that certainly needs some help?
Yeah, he did a really good job at Marshall. I think because it was a little off the national radar. Now, they did go into South Bend and beat Notre Dame last year, and his defense was a big reason why. The story I did for The Athletic with Manny Navarro, they had not just the best third down defense in the country last year, it is the best one in 5 years. Statistically, what they were able to do. And so I started talking to some coaches in the Sun Belt and was like, okay, what do you guys think of them? Both offensive and defensive, minds. And the first guy I talked to was a defense coordinator in the league, and he just raved about him because they would see a lot of stuff cross over as how they would, see what Marshall was doing on defense to some of these opponents. And then you talk to more offensive coordinators and head coaches in the league, and they had similar reaction. Now, he had really good cornerbacks, but he also does a really, really good job of keeping quarterbacks off balance and confusing people, and their guys play fast. I think the more I've talked to people, who know him and know what he does scheme-wise, I think this is going to turn out to be a really good hire because, as you said, Miami, had a really dismal first year for Mario Cristobal. It wasn't good on offense. It wasn't good on defense. I mean, they went from, I think, 5th in the ACC in defense to 13th last year. Kevin Steele has a big resume, but they really struggled. It wasn't just like the Middle Tennessee State game. It was a lot of other stuff. I mean, down the stretch. I think Lance Guidry, who Mario Cristobal has really been intrigued by for a long time, I think that will turn out to be a really good hire.
Now, what do we make of this? I actually talked to your colleague, Manny Navarro, about this, covers Miami for The Athletic, about the fact that Guidry has never coached in the Power Five, or that, he's a group of five coach. And, obviously the Notre Dame thing is up there. And Manny brought up a good point, which is, well, he's getting the best out of players that aren't 5 stars, and they're doing it against similar competition. What should Miami fans make of, or should we be concerned at all about the fact that Lance Guidry has never coached in the Power Five?
No, I don't think that's the thing to get hung up on. I would use this example. Before he got to Oregon, Chip Kelly was at New Hampshire. That worked out great. It's not, the fact that there's great coaching at all levels of college football. You could take a guy who was in the NFL at the highest level, and he may not be as good a defensive coordinator on the college game, right? So you see all sorts of stuff. That when he was at his last job, Guidry had to face, Bailey Zappi, where they were throwing it all over the place at Western Kentucky. And I think he faced them before that when they were at Houston Baptist with Zach Kitley, who's a really good offensive mind, now at Texas Tech. So, Miami fans have plenty of stuff to probably be frustrated by. I would not sweat the part that he came from Marshall. I would look at the results he got there as opposed to anything like that.
Mario Cristobal has been talking about culture and kind of reframing the culture at Miami since he got here. Culture-wise, Guidry seems pretty interesting. He seems like he's, how there'll be a stand-up comedian and they'll say, well, that guy's a comedian's comedian. Guidry seems like he's a coach's coach, and seems like he will fit in with the Mario Cristobal culture that he's trying to build here at Miami.
Yeah, we will see. I mean, I know Mario has wanted to hire him in the past or considered him. I mean, I think the fit is the hardest thing to assess because the fit isn't just how you work with the head coach; it's how you work with the coaches around you and the players. Everything I'd heard. I mean, I talked to Charles Huff, who is the head coach of Marshall and was Guidry's boss. And sometimes when guys leave to a bigger job, the head coach isn't always very effusive, even if that guy did a really good job for them. Charles Huff really spoke highly of Lance Guidry, not just because at one point I said, because Manny Navarro and I were working on this story, and Manny had said, what do you know about him as a recruiter? And you can look up people's stats, but you really have to talk to like somebody who coached with them to really know. Because even if what is said about them, like on the online recruiting sites, that may not be the clearest picture. And Huff was like, he got two terrific players who transferred from McNeese to there, and he goes 3 or 4 guys that now we have are going to be starters are guys he found. He said he's a really good evaluator. So I think that, because seems to be a very good recruiter, I think if you're not a good recruiter, you're not wired for it. I think it's going to be a little harder to exist in Mario Cristobal's orbit, to be honest.
So we talked about Lance Guidry. Let's get to the other side of the football. Josh Gaddis came in, Broyles Award winner. Everyone had high hopes. The power spread offense was what he ran, and it did not go over well on the field or off the field with fans. Josh Gaddis lasted 1 year at Miami. They've had a string of offensive coordinators here over the past half dozen years. So now we move on to Shannon Dawson, a guy that, man, I never thought that Mario would go in this direction. A guy that studied under the disciples of the air raid. Just not something that even crossed my mind, but here he is coming to Miami. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I knew Mario, and he had, some good meetings. I still was a little surprised, to be honest, that Mario ended up going in that direction, not because Shannon Dawson's not really smart, but he is an air raid guy. I mean, he learned under Hal Mummy and Dana Holgerson. It's not to say there aren't concepts, certainly in the run game, certainly in the pass game, that could really intrigue Mario and he could incorporate. And I imagine he will run the ball more than he has in the past. Now, in fairness to Dawson and Dana Holgerson is a Mike Leach guy, but Dana, of all the quote air raid guys, may have drifted the furthest from it in terms of he did a lot of different things, and maybe, and Shannon was a part of that. I also think, Shannon is a good quarterback guy in terms of development. You saw that with Clayton Tune, his guy, there most recently. You saw it at a bunch of his stops. I mean, Nick Mullins was a good quarterback who ended up in the NFL. I mean, the story that I posted a couple of days ago after he got hired, basically said to Miami fans, hey, if you're curious about how he is with quarterbacks, read this story. It was like 2 years ago. It's something I did when Mac Jones was blown up at Alabama and Stetson Bennett was really taking over at Georgia. Shannon Dawson was really the first college football coach who believed in both of them. And so you get a window into what he looks for in there. And again, I think Shannon's a really smart guy and smart football coach. We'll see how the fit is going to be. I mean, I think one of the challenges here, like we mentioned, how really dreadful Miami's defense was last year. Miami's personnel was not as bad, at least when you eyeballed it, compared to what on defense as it was on offense. Offensively, it's really suspect. They don't have a lot, no wow factor receiver. Running back is really, really shaky. They also had injuries on top of it, which they certainly couldn't afford. I would argue you could have had Kyle Shanahan running the offense, and I still think it would have probably disappointed Miami fans because you just didn't have that much to work with. I don't think Josh Gaddis is the reason why this thing really struggled last year. I think it was like there was a bunch of factors there where it's, like I said, it'll be interesting to see how this goes this year. And I don't think it's there's just a lot of stuff that goes into making an offense go. You can have some good parts to it, but if you don't have the firepower and you have a lot of different cooks in the kitchen, that's a big key. So we'll see how the staff chemistry is this time around.
I think, Bruce, a lot of people looked at kind of a regression with Tyler Van Dyke. Now, obviously, he had to deal with injuries later in the year, but what we saw what he did his freshman year, and then last year there was a regression. Now, obviously, it hurts when you lose talent at receiver, but
I also think on that, like this goes back to fit. So I think sometimes people are looking at the regression and saying, "No, that's a Josh Gaddis thing." Josh Gaddis wasn't the quarterback's coach,
right?
So I think when you have, like, at least on this regard, I think you have the quarterback coach being the offensive coordinator. Like, I think last year was kind of just a lot of mismatched parts, right? And I'm not blaming Frank Ponce either. I just think it was just, for whatever reason, that staff did not come together well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of players and coaches kind of at different times tuning Josh Gaddis out. Whatever, his approach was or is, or however it came together, the glue wasn't there. And I think that is something that's really important to Mario, is that there's kind of glue within the program.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's like, I know Mario has a very exhaustive, search process on the coaches. It's honestly, it's different than almost any other process I know of when it comes to the college hiring process. He's made some really good hires in the past. He certainly did at FIU, and he certainly did at Oregon. Here, there are some really good assistant coaches with some strong resumes who've done really good work. It just didn't fit, and again, I don't point the finger at Kevin Steele. I don't point the finger at Josh Gaddis, at Frank Ponce, the running backs coach. It was like, at the end of the day, I mean, it was not a good mesh as a staff, especially taking over what they took over. I mean, you can blame, I'm sure, the easiest thing for people to do is blame the previous staff. I think it's just, I think it's no one thing. It was a lot of things that contributed to just an abysmal 2022 for that football team.
Was that surprising? You've known Mario a long time. You just talked about what he did at FIU, what he's done, what he did at Oregon. Let's not forget assistant coaching stops, at Alabama, and even, back with Schiano at Rutgers, and he's been around for a long time. Did all of this surprise you, knowing Mario as you have over the years?
It did. I'll be honest. So when I went down there, it was actually at the first padded practice they had in August, and it was an eye opener for me. Not like defensively, they looked okay. They looked fine. It was offensively, I was like, wow, they do not have much firepower here. Again, I go back to, I don't care who was running the offense. Their receiving room was not good. Their running back room was really suspect. It's not like, and it's been forever since Miami's had an elite offensive line. They were nowhere near that. So you put all that stuff together, and I'm like, man, maybe they're an 8-win team, because I think they'll be good enough on defense. To me, I thought it was more of an eye opener that they were as mediocre as they were on defense, given, they had some talented transfers they brought in, like they just, and they had some guys who got better at linebacker, and Cam Kitchens is a good player. But then there's other guys who I never saw how they played against Middle Tennessee. Like, that was just an eye opener. And then you watch the Florida State game, they were horrible.
It was like a varsity against junior varsity situation.
Yeah, I don't know if it was as bad, and you'll remember this game too, like when Butch got there and they got smashed by Florida State.
47-0. Yep.
They were not ready to be at that level.
Right.
This should not have been as big a gap as it was, but it looked like a team, quite honestly, that just was not ready to be out there. And so, I'm not surprised that there was big staff shakeup that had to happen, including guys who've either, I just think it wasn't good for anybody. I don't think it's an indictment on this person or that person that they're not there. It was just a bad fit all the way around.
I think every Miami fan is rooting for Mario to get this right? He's a Miami guy, born and bred, loves his cafecito. So everyone's rooting for him to get it right. And obviously financially, I mean, the university is dug in, right? They have invested heavily under Mario. So, financially, he's got to get it right, because you're not getting out from this one. So what is your just outlook, 35,000-foot view about his ability to eventually get it right?
Look, I think he will get talent because he's a good evaluator and he's a relentless recruiter, and he will be demanding. I think the part that really has needed a massive overhaul is the alignment on the coaching staff. A lot of stuff I've heard from people who are there has been, last year was a lot of one step forward, two steps back. And I think, when Mario was at Oregon, I'm not saying there wasn't any pressure, because there certainly was, but I think, I think he had a staff that seemed to be way more on the same page than what he has now. I think that he will get players. That will be the biggest thing, I think, that will help him. He has good coaches. I really like the Lance Guidry hire. I think, I think that will work out well. I think Shannon's really smart. I'm just curious, like, offense, you need so many guys to be in alignment, right? And so, is that going to be exactly what, is ultimately what Shannon wants to do, what Mario wants to do, with whoever gets brought in to be the running backs coach and the receivers coach, like, you talk about adding guys, like this guy if you think about it, like certain guys have a lot of value as recruiters. And if you look at them through that prism more than, okay, what do they bring schematically or, development wise? I think it's really an interesting kind of like Rubik's Cube to put together right now. And so, I mean, if you had asked me a year ago, how confident am I that Mario Cristobal will lead Miami into a playoff? I'd be very confident, because I know his ability to recruit the area, and I know how relentless he will be. The part that I'm a little more leery of a year in is I don't know how many guys are Mario guys that he's riding with right now on that staff. And it's not to, again, I keep going back to, it's not to say these guys aren't good coaches, but like, if you ask me who are like the 3 or 4 guys who are Mario guys through and through, I know Alex Mirabal would fit that. I don't know after that how many guys see everything exactly the way Mario wants it to. I could see Lance Guidry seeing it. I just don't know in terms of like where, because there's been such an exhaustive search process. I think it's like you get a lot of guys in there where they're like, I don't know, it's going to be interesting. I think he will get them to be a playoff team. I'm not as confident as I was a year ago, just because this year, it's not a year 0. I mean, it happened, right? And so I don't think Mario has any doubts he'll get it going. That's the most important part of this. But you're going to need to see, I think, that when the transfer portal springs open again in a couple months, that some big time receivers and maybe running backs, not just a D lineman here or there, are going to want to come to play at Miami. And if you don't start seeing that, I think it's like, that'll show you how close or how far they are from being a real contender to be a top 15 team. Because, when Manny Diaz was there, they had some good teams. I mean, the year that they blew out Notre Dame, that was a little bit of a mirage, with Richt, where they weren't a real title contender, but they were still, they were really good on defense. They were opportunistic.
Yep.
I think, like, they were at least a top 25 team for the most part of the last, stretch of years, but that's not good enough, right? They're not going to want somebody here for 5 years. Like, they hired Mario to go win a national title. They aren't close to doing that or competing for national titles because they don't have the talent to do it.
Heck, let's win the ACC first. Let's make that happen. And I don't think they're really close there.
They're not. I mean, I don't think they are either. Like, let's say whoever the Jordan Addison of the transfer portal is going to be 3 months from now. I have no idea if he's going to want to come play at Miami or whatever kind of resources. But if they don't add somebody of those caliber, where they're going to be Charleston Rambo was a solid player in the Big 12, but he was like a star at Miami because that shows you the gap in where they were compared to really where they need to be. He wasn't CeeDee Lamb at Oklahoma.
Before that, they got a guy like KJ Osborne, right? I mean, he comes from Buffalo, but he was a dynamic receiver, and now he's doing pretty well for the Vikings. They just haven't been able to make that impact, get that impact type of player.
Yeah, I mean, I would look at it. I mean, the year I was around LSU when they won the national title, they obviously had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow was completely, 10 times the next level of where Miami's at. But, even beyond that, Terrace Marshall would be like Michael Irvin compared to what Miami's had. And then probably even you go 2 more receivers, and like you can't expect to compete for a playoff spot when maybe your best 2 receivers wouldn't even be in the top 4 at some of these other schools, and it's not like they may have some talent here or there if they can stay healthy at running back, but it's not like there's Edgerrin James there,
maybe Bruce, maybe my thinking's too jaded and old school, but I still find it hard to believe that the University of Miami with this recruiting base doesn't have good enough skill position players.
Well, right now, I mean, if you were to rank them as at just what they have skill wise, I don't know if you took receivers. Now they were, Mallory's a good tight end, but I don't think skill wise they were in the top 50 in college. No. I'm not even sure if they were in the top 100 because I think like Tulane's wasn't a Power 5 school. Tulane had, was better at quarterback. They had a way, Spears is a way better dynamic player than anything Miami had. Right. And, I think there's a bunch of schools like this. So I think that's that's a challenge. And it's like a little bit of chicken and the egg, because I don't know how many guys are going to want to play if you're sputtering around and it's like you're a shell of yourself. I mean, I don't think it would take Miami that much to get them to be an 8-win team, but they're not there right now. I mean,
right, but then to go from an 8-win team to a 10, 11, or 12-win team, that's a whole nother.
That is a whole big different animal. And like, I think if they hit the portal well on the, later this spring, I think they can be a 7 or 8-win team next year. But are you in position then? Like, how far off are you? Like, are you 3 years away in your case where you're like, okay, in 2025, we think we could compete for a playoff spot, when the play, or, even 2024, the playoffs gonna, like, are we really a big step away from being at least a top 15 team? Because if you're a top 15 team, when the playoff expands, you can say you have a shot to be a playoff team.
Right.
Right now they are not close to that. So we need to see them, I mean, we need to see that these hires turned out to be very good fits. Because I think that's where you got to look at it. Not like, does this guy know, does this guy know what he's doing? They all know what they're doing. I just don't think that it's like how much alignment is there.
He is Bruce Feldman. You can follow him at Bruce Feldman CFB on Twitter. And of course, read him often in The Athletic, which I just renewed my subscription to. So I hope, you get a shekel in your pocket, Bruce, for that. But I think he's absolutely the best when it comes to college football knowledge. Bruce, thank you so much for taking the time.
Good seeing you. Thanks for having me.
Will do.